Okay. So, hey guys, my name is Tom Naples with Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Northern Illinois. I did want to, and thanks, Sadia, for the introduction. I do want to say, I ask one thing. If you do have a question, if you can drop it in the chat, and then Sadia, if you wouldn't mind, you can feel free to stop me and just ask the question because I'd rather kind of address it as we go through it.
Okay.
Um, than kind of wait till the end. I don't want people kind of, have a question burning, burning in their minds, and that kind of, has them stop paying attention to everything else I say. So what I found is we just answer the question, we move on, and it works out well for everybody. So with that in mind, but I do need the help of Sadia, given the fact that um, I cannot see the screen. I can't see the Zoom screen. I can just see the presentation screen right now. So with that, I'm going to move on. We're going to talk about renters' rights and responsibilities and other cool stuff today, but within the realms of rights, responsibility, and renting. So, um, quick little blurb on us and what we do. We are Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Northern Illinois. We're located in McHenry Lake and Kane counties. We're essentially credit counselors. We provide people with help in getting through their finances, and whether it's budgeting, and we'll talk about everything that we do. But we have bilingual counselors in all three of our offices. We are a not-for-profit. We've been around since 1982. We are a not-for-profit agency, excuse me, and we provide our services to our clients. We provide them free of charge by way of grants and other donated funds to us from large funders. So because of that, we are HUD certified for housing counseling, and that includes anything from first time buyers to foreclosure prevention, reverse mortgages, renters. We've done a lot of rental assistance over the last 6 months. I think that's really starting to wind down right now. We're also affiliates of the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, and our counselors are certified in debt and credit counseling as well. So that includes basic budgeting, credit repair, debt management programs, things like that. Um, we are also approved by the courts for bankruptcy counseling and education. So we cover a kind of a broad swath of personal finance things, areas. Our two locations, our two physical locations right now are Woodstock and Elgin. We're looking for a place in Lake County. We should have one shortly. But most of our counseling sessions are provided over the phone or by Zoom. And so that's not really what I would call a setback by any stretch. If you're thinking about a counseling session, or would like to get a hold of us or check out what we do, you can check us out at illinoiscccs.org, or you can call our phone number if you wanted to request a counseling service. I will show this same slide at the end of the deck. Most people hear it at the beginning and go, and then at the end they go, you know what, maybe I should talk to somebody. So I'll show this again at the end of the deck, just to, from experience. So when we talk about counseling services, like I said, we have bankruptcy, and I'm lifting this straight from the website at this point. We have bankruptcy, we have credit reports, and we can help people work on not only understanding their credit reports, pulling down their credit reports. We can also kind of look at, okay, how do we find out your credit score? We can help you improve your credit score, things like that. There's all sorts of things that you can do within your credit report and your credit scores. Debt management, as it's described here, is a formal it's a formal program where you can reduce your debt. You pay down all your debt over a 3 to 5 year period by making payments and essentially tearing up your credit cards. So some people think that's a great thing. Some people think that's something they have to do. The people who do it swear by it, but I don't think it's for everybody. But there's also ways within working with the credit. There's all different ways and all different options. Financial counseling is just that general budgeting help, that type of thing. you know, just kind of having a second set of eyes on your budget and your you know, your spending plan, if you will. Housing, as I said, we're HUD certified, so any type of housing, and we're going to talk about rentals tonight, but any type of housing we can help in. And then also student loans, which is becoming a hot topic again. I think it was starting to fall off as a hot topic, and could because Joe Biden, you know, announced the $10,000 and $20,000 loan forgiveness, but now you know, with all the lawsuits out there and the fact that the student loan cancellation has now been canceled, I have a feeling it's going to become a hot topic again. I also believe that it wouldn't shock me at all if even though Joe Biden said that that all the payment pause would end in December, it wouldn't shock me at all if this went on a little bit longer now until they iron out the lawsuits. So anyway, that's enough on student loans. On the literacy side, these are some of the things that we talk about. So these are some of the topics that we have. And today we're going to talk about renters' rights. You can see in the upper left-hand corner. So I like to say that everything, it's all part of the plan. This whole financial plan, you can see all the different elements that feed into a budget are on the outside, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's your daily expenses, and you're just trying to make your, you know, trying to make your monthly payments work for you. Or if you're saving for retirement, or you have a mortgage, or you have an auto loan, that all this stuff kind of feeds in. These are all different elements that feed into what I think is kind of, you know, everything kind of leads into the budget, which is the epicenter of the financial plan. The four pillars are income, expenses, savings or assets, and then debt. And then everything outside of that kind of feeds into that. So today, before we talk about that, I guess typically people say they don't really, there's not a lot of people who just say, I need a budget. They typically say, I need a budget because I need to come up with a savings vehicle, or I need to, you know, find a way to handle my income and expense management on a monthly basis. My credit score is horrible. I need to make it better. Big ticket purchases, retirement savings. There's always a reason to start a budget. And once you kind of start to figure out exactly what those reasons are, it's easy to start putting the budget in place around that. The budget is essentially the tool that gets you from where you are today to where you want to be with respect to your goals. And some of them can be short-term, some can be long-term. Chances are they're all over the place. Some are short, some are long. You can take the low-hanging fruit. I typically say keep your goals reasonable, but within reason. Give yourself some stretch goals too, in such a way where you know, once you hit some of your short-term goals and realize that, hey, all it really took was a plan to put this in place, and I can start to hit some of these and I can be successful, some of those stretch goals may not seem as far off as you might think. So kind of keep your eye on the horizon and keep moving in that direction. Always expect the unexpected, because life happens, and don't give up. So now we go back to, and we're talking about, you can see we're talking about today's discussion. The upper left-hand corner is we're talking about rent and renters' rights. So at first, we'll do an icebreaker. The average credit score needed to rent an apartment in 2021. That's probably gone up a little bit in 2022, but this is the last post that I've seen on it, and I haven't seen anything that I can update it with. So the average score, and it's by state. In the U.S., it was 638, which is you know, about I'd say a little under prime, but you can see here, and then the 10 cities with the highest credit scores in the U.S. in 2020, and this is kind of, remember, this is COVID land or COVID time. You can see San Francisco's at the highest, you know, in the top 10, you know, and San Diego's pretty high as well at 680. And then on the other side, you know, Arlington, Texas, you know, up through Tulsa, you know, are the lowest in the U.S. What I would say is that, you know, a betting man would say that Chicago is somewhere between 580 and 680. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to say that we kind of wind up somewhere in the middle there. So I don't know exactly what the average for Chicago is, but that kind of gives you an idea. So anyway, we move on. Hopefully you can see at the top. I don't know why this just popped up, but I'm going to try and keep my cursor down here. So what we're going to talk about today, you know what your rights and your responsibilities are as a tenant, and then are you familiar with what the landlord's responsibilities are, and you know, and what the landlord's rights are as well. So we're going to talk about different things here. We're going to talk about renter's insurance. I think it's really important. And then at the end, I'll give you some resources for not only working on budgeting, working on budgets to kind of help you determine what you can afford and what you can't afford, but then also some tips that we have from our legal friends at Prairie State Legal, who have provided us with some tips. And I actually found a lender's, or I'm sorry, a renter's handbook that I think is pretty nice, that I think you might like. So anyway, first though, we're going to talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Prohibits discrimination against 7 protected characteristics, and we'll walk through those in the video that I'm about to show you. But it covers most housing situations, requires, and it actually requires that it has requirements that rental rates and terms of terms of a lease must be the same for all people, and landlords cannot lie about availability or status. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show something. I'm going to show something on the Fair Housing Act, the history of the Fair Housing Act. I think it's a pretty interesting video. Clearly, I think you'll like it. So.
Few in the nation believed that fair housing would in our time become the unchallenged law of this land. And indeed, this bill has had a long and stormy trip.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
The death of the prophet of nonviolence set off the worst outbreak of arson, looting, and criminal activity in the nation's history. Washington's ghettos burned within a few blocks of the nation's capital.
The life of a man who symbolized the freedom and faith of America has been taken. And no words of mine can fill the void of the eloquent voice that has been stilled. But this I do believe deeply. The dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has not died with him.
President Johnson was willing to speak up and say, we have to pass a fair housing bill.
Hello, Mr. President? Yes, Dick. We're in trouble. We need some help. Yes? I'm afraid of that.
Federal troops, for the first time since the Civil War, took up positions to guard government buildings.
Nothing's probably touchier than your own neighborhood and your own home or your own apartment. The administration, which supported the bill, said this has no chance. The other stuff is okay, but this will kill any politician that touches it.
Well, I just could not live beside them. I don't feel that they should be oppressed. But I moved here because it was a white community.
I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. And if there's too many colored people around here, I definitely will get out.
I think that, well, the property values will immediately go down if they're allowed to move in here in any number.
It seems as though our country is pulling apart into separate societies, where whites have jobs and Negroes have unemployment, where the middle class lives in suburbs and the poor are left in the ghettos, where one group of Americans looks upon another group of Americans with growing mistrust and even dread.
Then the bill went over into the House Rules Committee, and under the chairmanship of the famous Judge Smith, a right-wing segregationist from Virginia, he wouldn't hold hearings on it. He would take the bill home so nobody could act on it, and we were running out of time.
Thousands flowed through the rainy streets of Memphis this day, finishing a march that Dr. King planned to lead in support of striking garbage workers.
How many men must die before we can really have a free and true and peaceful society?
Cause you're present, Lord. And I know you'll reach out and take mine. You take our hand.
The death of Martin Luther King is a tragic thing, but no legislation should be passed as a memorial to anyone.
In spite of the riots, I am going to support this legislation with all the vigor that I possess.
The laws that we pass up here are for all time. The Martin Luther Kings come and go.
The public reaction to this horror gave the sensible members of the committee a compelling argument that the House Rules Committee had to report that bill out. And I think that's how we got our bill. They just didn't dare bottle it up any longer.
And I have a dream that one day Negroes will be able to buy a house anywhere that their money will carry them.
At long last this afternoon, fair housing for all is now a part of the American way of life. Democracy's work is being done, and the bell of freedom rings out a little louder. We have come some of the way, not near all of it.
Fight still goes on because we unfortunately have the laws, but we don't have the enforcement. That we have changed, but we still have the same kinds of discrimination.
The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights said today that efforts by federal agencies to end housing discrimination have been generally superficial or incomplete.
President Carter has ordered federal agencies to use all means possible to strengthen fair housing programs.
For the first time, people with disabilities and families with children will be protected from housing discrimination.
President Reagan signed legislation today designed to toughen up the nation's fair housing laws.
Why did you take part in this demonstration today? Just because there was a huge crowd, or did you have any personal reason?
Well, I took part in this march today because of Martin Luther King and what he stood for, because this march is what he died for.
You know what he stood for?
Yes. He stood for nonviolence and peace for all men of all kinds. And I think if he died for it, I could carry out what he started.
There we go. So I don't think we need to roll through the credits here, but you get the idea. So, and I feel like in some ways we've come a long way. In other ways we still have a ways to go. So, but let me get us back into, if I can move this thing, this would be nice. Here we go. I'm going to get us back into here. And, there we go. And move on. So we're going to talk about, we'll talk about different things that we're going to be dealing with, you know, with housing in general and with rentals. And the first thing that comes up is potential obstacles. And you know, I think that this is something that ideally it's something that we try to address, you know, maybe, you know, 6 to 9 months before we're even thinking about moving out. I think the worst thing that can happen is that you're forced to move out and you don't have your financial ducks in a row, and you have 30 days to move out of the premises. So the goal of this is to kind of start thinking about, as you start thinking about rentals or start thinking about your next rental, start thinking about, you know, the requirements that are in place. You know, with respect, is your rent greater than 30% of your income? If it's not, if it's higher than that, then what do we do? Do we find a better place? We find a different place where we can afford to, you know, get that under 30% or get it close to 30%. If we have unpaid utility bills, let's try and get caught up on those, or find ways to start covering for utility bills, or little or no savings. Essentially get ourselves in a position. You know, same thing with credit history, bad rental history, you know, any type of banking history, that's bad. You know, it may be time to talk to, and I know we bring up, you know, talk to a certified credit counselor, or talk to just a financial counselor or credit counselor. At the end of the day, it may be a good idea to do that just to get your ducks in a row, so that there are no surprises when you do go in to try and start renting a place, that, you know what your credit score is, you know, kind of what your debt to income level is going to be, you know, that your financial picture looks as pretty as it's going to look, or maybe that it needs to look. But you know, instead of waiting until the last minute, it's a good idea to start addressing some of those issues up front, so that you don't have, you know, so you don't run into that when you're also trying to pay attention to where you want to live or what you want to do. You know, when you can pay more attention to the rental when you know that you have this behind you and set aside. So we always say, kind of start thinking about it a little bit ahead of time and make sure that that's the best thing we can do. I wish that there was a way that I could move this without just, you know, getting into some way here. But I think I'll leave it here for now. So
Tom, actually, if you when you share your screen, if you don't click the optimize or something, I think there's 2 check boxes, then it won't happen. But so you have to unshare and share again then, though. That's the only thing.
So what is so I don't optimize the screen?
Right. When you first, then it gets rid of those bars.
All right, guys, I'm going to do that real quick. Sorry about this. It's just, here, I'll do this and I'll switch out, and I'm going to switch right back in again. I'm going to close that out for a quick second. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, so it's optimized for video clip. Okay, let's do that. Let's see what happens. So just don't optimize it and let's see what happens.
Right.
And it might be okay. And it might be because I did already, because I did have the video clip on there, because I think everything was going fine until that happened.
Yeah, so, there you go.
All right. So I've got this in there. Can you guys see? I'm going to move this down here so you guys can see. All right. Do I block it when I do that? I'm just going to leave it in this corner.
No, you're fine now. We don't see.
Okay, so some rental basics. You know, one, of course, we want to try and find the right neighborhood, choosing the right place to live, picking out your furniture, that type of thing. But also, it's really important to start thinking about, upfront costs, what type of security deposit you could potentially have, how much money are you going to need upfront to move in, what utilities are you responsible for paying versus your landlord, and what, and obviously, in some places the utilities are more covered by the landlord. You might cover, electric or water, and in other places they just they'll kind of bill you for trash. But there's a lot of different ways that it can happen. So just make sure that you know and understand exactly how yours works. Your lease, is it a rental agreement? Is it contractual, or is it tenancy at will? Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether you know the legal terms. What you really need to know is this a year-long lease? Is it a 12-month lease? Is it a 6-month lease? Is it a 30-day lease that rolls over on a continual basis? That's the kind of stuff that you really need to kind of get your arms around, and it's all in the lease, and it'll tell you exactly what's going on in that lease. How do things get fixed? Who's responsible for it? If you do have something, is there a protocol that needs to be followed in order to have the landlord fix it? Does the landlord have to fix it? There's so many questions. Can you sublet your apartment if you need to? Can you have pets? Parking, what does parking look like? Do you have a parking spot? Do you have, there's so many different questions on there that are all answered, and they try to answer them up front. But you also want to make sure that it's in the lease, it's written in the lease. If they're marketing it to you in some way, shape, or form and saying, hey, this is what we do and this is what it is, make sure that you get it in the lease so it actually does exist. So it's all about looking for fees. These leases can get pretty long, and but it's really important. I can't tell you how many people just say, where do I sign? Let me move on. It's really important to look at the leases and maybe get through it and understand exactly what they're trying to say here, because they wrote it for a reason. So if they wrote it for a reason, it's up to you to read it for a reason, if you know what I mean. I think it's really important to make sure that you understand, or get somebody who can help you to understand exactly what's in that lease. It's amazing what the kind of stuff that they'll throw in there too. I just looked at my son's lease, and it was, there's just a lot of things in there about who's responsible for what payment, when it's due, what can happen if you don't pay it, can they charge you interest, all this. It's all there, but you need to know it. So as it says here, can I have a roommate? Can I have a roommate, or does a roommate have to be on a lease? That's very important. And typically the roommate has to be on a lease. What kind of fees, the additional fees, acceptable payment methods. Some people will only take a Zelle, or they'll take they'll only take checks, or, and some have an app that you have to pay through. So it's just, everybody's different. So it's really important to understand how all this works. One of the things that, I think is really interesting. I have two sons who are on leases right now. One of them was required to get renter's insurance, and the other one has no idea what renter's insurance is. So I am going to show you a quick video on what renter's insurance is, and then we can talk about this. But I will tell you that, it's pretty interesting, and not a lot of people know what renter's insurance is. So
if you are struggling with vision problems, add half a teaspoon of this to a glass of water before bed. Every adult human has around...
Sometimes you have to see ads. So here you go. Anyway, here you go.
Home is where the heart is, and maybe all of your stuff too. But if you're among the 1/3 of all U.S. households that rent, your stuff may not be protected should you suffer a fire or theft. While the landlord or owner of the building you live in likely carries insurance, that insurance only provides coverage for the building itself, not your personal property inside that building. Where would you get coverage for your furnishings, clothing, and electronics? The answer is renter's insurance. A renter's policy offers protection for your personal property at your place of residence or anywhere in the world against covered losses. Examples of some covered losses include lightning, wind or hail, and the previously mentioned fire and theft. Renter's insurance, like a homeowner's policy, has two sections: property coverage and liability coverage. The main difference between the two policies is the property coverage section under a renter's policy does not cover the building you live in or other structures on the property, only your personal belongings inside that building. This section of the policy also includes coverage for small alterations or additions you may have made to your rental at your own expense. A renter's policy also provides loss of use coverage for any additional living expenses you incur when you have lost the use of your home. For example, should you have to vacate your apartment due to a fire in the building, This coverage would pay for the additional cost of a hotel or other temporary living expenses you would not normally have until the damage to your apartment can be repaired. The second part of a renter's policy provides liability and medical payments coverages. Liability coverage protects you and your guests for unintended damage to your rental or for an accident that occurs in your home. For example, if you were to leave the water running and flood your apartment, and maybe the one below, your liability coverage would pay for the damages, up to the policy's limit, of course. And should the tenant of that apartment below you choose to sue you for their damages, this coverage could also defend you against a lawsuit and help pay for the expenses associated with that lawsuit. Medical payments coverage pays for medical bills incurred by guests injured on your property. It also covers injury you caused to someone else while you're away from home. So, should a guest in your home fall and injure themselves, or if you poke someone in the eye with your umbrella while getting on the bus, your renter's policy would cover their medical expenses, as well as any legal fees incurred because of the incident. This coverage does not, however, cover your own medical bills if you are injured. Your health insurance would take effect in this situation. Additional liability coverages under a renter's policy include claims expenses, first aid expenses, damage to property of others, and loss assessment. While renter's insurance is an important coverage for anyone who rents their home, it's a common misconception that if a renter is still in college, their parents' homeowner's policy will cover their belongings if the unthinkable happens. While there may be limited coverage for this personal property, the truth is anyone who rents their residence, including college students, should have a renter's policy to protect their possessions in the event of a loss. If a disaster strikes, the cost of all of your belongings can add up quickly. Fortunately, renter's insurance is extremely affordable. Talk to your independent insurance agent today to learn more about how to protect your belongings with a low-cost renter's insurance policy.
Alrighty. So one of the things that I think is really,
if you want to make six figures or more in your insurance business,
what happened there? All right. So one of the things I think is really important here, and it's been spelled out really nicely, but I mean, it's just to reiterate, you know, most people think that just because they're, you know, the insurance, their landlord will cover their belongings in the event of, you know, some catastrophe. That's not the case at all. In fact, the landlord's in it for himself, and he's insuring himself. He's insuring his dwelling, but he's not insuring anything that you own. The other thing that kind of popped out that I want to make sure everybody's aware of is that the college thing. It comes down to everybody's insurance policy is different. But one of the things that I think is that you should think about is in a dorm, I think for the most part, a kid would be covered under their parents' policy. I think it's when they go out and move on to off-campus housing. But again, every policy is different, so make sure you understand what's in your policy specifically. But renter's insurance is really one of those things that not a lot of people know about, and yet you know, they really should. So what this is, and what this shows is how many renters in each state actually have insurance. And you can see in the great state of Illinois that only a third of renters have renter's insurance. And the other thing it shows is the annual premium for renter's insurance, which is $171. And if you do the math, that means that you're looking at less than $15 a month. So it's cheap. Given what you just heard, there might be some copays and deductibles there, but on average, it's less than $15 a month. The only thing I would make sure that I would cover on that is that you want replacement cost on your policy. You can have it on I think it's on a cost basis or on a replacement cost. The cost basis kind of looks at it and depreciates it over time. The replacement cost, if something happens to your TV, for example, and it's 3 years old, some people would give you you had a cost basis, it would give you a depreciation value. If you had a replacement, it would give you the cost of a new TV to replace it. They're replacing the TV, not the depreciated value of it. So that's how you should be looking at it. So let's move on. Reasons that a lease can be terminated without continuing to pay rent for the entire lease term would be, there's three of them. If a landlord breaches conditions stated in the lease, so if he's not living up to his end of the bargain, If the property becomes uninhabitable for some reason, I would say that one of those could potentially be like if, one, if let's say, there was a flood above you and it's, you've got water leaking into your apartment, that could be a reason. If if there's a fire or something like that, or a fire that wasn't caused by you, but it's still becoming uninhabitable, you have the ability to terminate that lease. Or you or your spouse are relocated for military assignment. Keep in mind that in that second instance where your property becomes uninhabitable, if you have renter's insurance, then you have the ability, they will move you out and they will relocate you while your property becomes habitable again. So that's kind of a nice, again, there's a lot of good things within renter's insurance that it's worth kind of keeping an eye on and taking a look at it for. What are the landlord's responsibilities? Once you've moved in, one, they have to abide by the lease, of course. But really they're when you look at the grand vision of what they need to do, they need to provide safe and habitable housing. They need to ensure that you have access to quiet enjoyment of your home and its surroundings. And they have to ensure that your security deposit is returned by the deadline if or when you do not renew your lease. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't come back with a bill, but they have to at least, they can't just say, oh yeah, no, we that's ours now. They need to provide you with a reason or even a bill, and you can argue with them, and a lot of people do, and there's a lot of people who take liberty with it, but that is their requirement. So, in the first step, so when we start thinking about rentals, what are the first things we should be looking for? Decide where we want to live. Should we get insurance? Yes, we just talked about that. What kind of rental is best for you? It really depends. You want to go short term? You want to go longer term? Chances are most people just kind of sit at a 1-year lease and then they decide and they kind of move on and kind of decide, you can either renew your lease for another year and maybe renegotiate your lease, or you just kind of let it ride. And I think there are people who just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to let it ride at the rate that it's at now. It just all depends, but what kind of rental is best for you. Think about the type of lease, and then think about all the different things that you want in there. If you want your utilities included, some sort of the pool, whatever. The counselors can help you in terms of what to expect in your release. In your lease, what to look for when inspecting your home, documents that you'll need, and your fair housing rights. So we also have a resource in the back that I'll show you that I think will be helpful in that respect. Is renting right for you? It's really important. You may not be ready for renting, but it's important to ask yourself this question. Create a realistic budget for your lifestyle. The best thing to do is kind of look at what your budget is now, how it looks, and then can I implement, in addition to what I have in my budget, what do I have to do? What kind of sacrifices might I have to make in order to, include a lease payment in there that maybe I'm not making now, or a higher lease payment that I haven't made, in the past. So if I have to increase my lease payment by $200 and I don't have a roommate or something like that, okay, how do I offset some of those costs? Or do I have that money and it just comes out of savings? I save less money. So, but know and understand where that money's coming from or how you're going to have that money. And can you do it comfortably? If you're kind of scraping every month to get by, it's just not a lot of fun at the end of the day. So kind of, do what you need to, run the numbers ahead of time. So at least you know what you're expecting and what to expect and how to, and be ready for it. Don't forget your food, your personal bills, other expenses in there. And like I said, if you already have a budget, it's kind of nice because you can just overlay what this would look like, and then take out some of the pieces that you wouldn't have, if you were to change out, essentially, if you were going to change over from one place to another place or to move out on your own. And don't forget about the unexpected expenses. And really what that means is having emergency savings, in your somewhere on you, so think about, for the landlord, when we talk about the landlord and his responsibilities, it's his job to keep accurate records of your monthly payments, provide safe and habitable housing. We talked about that. Maintain tenant safety, provide notice of entry. If he's going into your apartment, he needs to tell you or she, respond to and perform maintenance and repairs. It's very important that they do that in a timely manner, and certainly in situations where safety is involved. And they have to return your security deposit in a timely manner. For you, for the renter, maintain the property, prevent damage as much as you possibly can. Report any issues that you have with the place, whether it's electrical or heating or whatever. If you have water issues, report that. You can't just let them sit there. Pay your rent on time every time. This is probably one of the most important things and one of the most overlooked things. Keep a copy of your signed lease. We have just kind of gone through a whole probably 6 to 12 months of rental assistance in McHenry County. And one of the things that became apparent when we started this process, and we were working with the county, McHenry County, and to facilitate some of these requests. But one of the first things that's come up often, and it's so frequent, is people don't have signed copies of their leases. Make sure you have and keep a signed copy of your lease. Keep receipts of all the payments that you make. If you run into trouble, talk to your landlord. But to me, the number one thing is make sure you have a signed copy of your lease, because that really is your Bible. I mean, at the end of the day, that's your owner's manual. That's really what's driving, a lot of decisions by a lot of people. So by both the lender and the landlord, I'm sorry, the renter and the landlord. So the major takeaways that I want you to walk away with here, it's a big first step. Be prepared financially up front, and then be prepared and kind of know what you're looking for. So don't, and kind of go into there. Don't try to pull the trigger very quickly. Take your time. The best way to do this is to take your time and really kind of, work through the issues that you think are necessary, work through the things that you're not 100% sure about. Make sure you get comfortable with them. And make sure you have a pretty good handle on what's going on. Make sure that your lease is signed, and your assigned lease is your owner's manual. Read that lease cover to cover. It is written. There's some boilerplate legal stuff in there that you can kind of look and say, hey, maybe it's not that important. But if you get into the nuts and bolts of the lease, it'll tell you everything you need to know. And I promise you look in there, and there's an awful lot of stuff in there. And if you have questions, ask them before you sign it. Ask them. They're much more apt to answer the questions before you sign the lease than after. As you saw in the video, have adequate renter's insurance. It's really important. It's not that expensive. By the way, renter's insurance is no different than than car insurance. So any type of, any place where you get homeowner's insurance, where you can get automobile insurance, you can get renter's insurance as well. So I would say, your typical, your Allstate, State Farm, Nationwide, Geico, you name it, Progressive. And then of course, budget for expenses and emergencies, because they can and do happen. So, and that's what I'm hoping you take away from this. What I have here for you, and I'm going to move this thing out of the way, so you'll be able to do this, but so I've included in the chat, and Sadia, if you could, I put in their resources, and then I put in there in our chat, I put in the resources, and I put in the link. So I can add a link. So we're going to add a link in the chat so that you can see the resource link. And what it is it provides you with a consumer's almanac, a link. It's a sheet with a link to a consumer's almanac, which is more of a budgeting help. A spreadsheet that I actually built to help get you through the consumer's almanac, and it essentially does the math for you. And it's pretty self-explanatory. If you ever have any issues with it, my email's on there. Feel free to email me, and I can walk you through it. I can either email you back, or I could just call you up and walk you through it. But I built the spreadsheet. Make a copy of your own, and then you can just play with it and do what you want, but it'll really help you to budget. It provides a lot of budgeting tools for you. The two on the bottom are from our friends at Prairie State Legal. Renter's Tips, which is a 2-page quick, kind of a quick and dirty, starting point to start what you're thinking about, what to think about when you're doing when you're starting to think about renting. I think it's really helpful. And then if you really want to get into it, the renter's handbook, that is a 85-page book, but it also has resources in there. It also has, for example, the Prairie State legal contacts and things like that. So it's Illinois centric, but feel free to download it. I think I looked at it and I thought it was a wonderful book and a wonderful resource. They're telling you that it's not going to take the place of a lawyer, but it's a good start to help you get an idea of whether or not you should be contacting a lawyer. So again, you can either pull it off of there, or if you have a smartphone and you want to hit this right here, it'll take you to the same spot. So there you go. Getting back to this, I always at the end of my presentations, I always kind of take you back and say, okay, again, as we look at it, it's all part of the plan. So we talked about rent and where it comes in, but at the end of the day, it's really a part of the plan, but it's all interconnected, right? Because as I said, we had to talk about a budget. We had to talk about income and our expenses and our savings and our debt, just to make sure that everything works before we take on a rental piece. The way people get into trouble is they take on too much too quickly. And usually but the people who don't typically have the capacity to take on new things and don't push too hard or overspend or overtax their resources. So getting back here to the end here, I'm just it won't let me move down now. So anyway, I told you I would show you the sheet at the end that we showed at the beginning. Really at the end of the day, if you wanted to speak with a counselor, you can either call our number 815-338-5757 if you wanted to talk to them, about housing or anything else for that matter. And then also the website, which is not showing up here, but I'm going to move it over here, is illinoiscccs.org. So these are our funders. Shout out to them. We thank them all for helping us out. And these are the people who help you, who help our clients get the services they can for free. And then the last thing is our survey, and I'll leave this up. And if you could help me out, there's also a survey link in the chat. If you could help me out with that and just tell me what you thought of this, I would greatly appreciate it. If you can help me kind of make this better for you, I'm always looking to try and make these better in some way, shape, or form. So if you can help me out, give me your comments on it, liked it, thumbs up, thumbs down, I'd appreciate it. So with that, if we have any questions, fire away.